Alright, hello there. My name is Jay Slew. I'm a member of the Inquiry team from the 2023 to 2024 season. I do Codebusters and it is my favorite event. So let me tell you guys about the K1 and K2 keyword recovery process. So in the case that I'm assuming you're a new member of the 2024 to 2025 season, and if you don't know how to do Aristocrats already, I'll recommend you to look into the basic Aristocrats and how to do them first before jumping into this video. Because this is a little bit more nuanced than just a regular Aristocrat, so you should understand them first. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So here's our table of contents. First we'll talk about what is a keyword, and then we'll talk about what is a K1 or K2, and then we'll do some practice problems. Some of them I made myself and some of them I found online. So let's go. So what is a keyword? So a keyword is pretty much just a phrase or a word that is used to encrypt any cipher. They can be used in a lot of different things, such as the Porta cipher or also the fractionated Moore cipher. But for this video, I'm going to talk specifically about cryptograms. And you should understand the term cryptograms. It means basically just aristocrats, patristocrats, and xenocrypts. All of those are pretty similar. They're encoded and decoded in the same ways. And they're all considered cryptograms. So when I talk about aristocrats or cryptograms, those are the ones that are going to use the keyword K1, K2, K3, and K4 in this video. And now for the purposes of Codebusters, the event, you only expected to know the K1, K2, and K3 cipher. And I'm only going to explain the K1 and K2 in this video because the K3 is a lot more complicated and definitely requires its very own video. But yeah, here's something that you should understand down here, which is the plain text versus the ciphertext. So basically, you have to distinguish between those two because I'm going to bring up some terminology to explain the K1 and K2. So the ciphertext is basically the text that they provide to you before you try to find a solution. So this jumbled up text here, it's considered the ciphertext, and it corresponds to this column right here. This is the part where they also provide to you that's already filled in. And then the plain text is basically the things that you write down and the things that you fill in manually by yourself. So the quote that you decode is actually called this plain text, and the replacement is also the plain text. For example, let's see over here, the ciphertext is R, and it's R here, and the plain text is D, and the plain text is D here. You can kind of remember this as ciphertext basically being the code for cipher, right? And the plain text, since it's plain, you can understand it. So that's the plain text. Before moving on, I'll recommend you to definitely take a pause if you don't understand this, because this will be confusing if you don't necessarily understand this right now. So yeah. Now let's look at some of the differences between the K1 and K2 and K3 on the surface. So basically for the K1 cipher, it is when there's a keyword in the plain text, as you can see here. These are all the same quotes and using the same keyword of sanitize. So as you can see here, the keyword is in the plain text here, sanitize. And if you can notice how a keyword works is basically it comes at the end of the last alphabet, which in this case is Y because Z is already using the keyword. And then so this is the end basically. If Z wasn't the keyword, then this would be Z right here. But since it is, it's going to be Y. And then after the last word of the keyword, the alphabet refreshes itself. So it goes B, C, D, and the E is not here because E is using the keyword. And the F, G, H, and I is not here because I is using the keyword. And A isn't here because A is using the keyword. And so on. That's how keywords work basically. So for K1, it's considered the easiest to find because it's more the way you find an aristocrat is you just fill it in and you get the plain text, and that's the easiest way that most people find to do it. And the K2 is slightly more complicated, and the K3 is a whole nother process. For the K2, instead of having the keyword in the plain text, it has in the ciphertext, as you can see up here. This won't necessarily be what your table will look like on the actual test. It will most likely look something like this rather than that, because this one is swapped around, as you can see. But there's a method for finding it using this way as well, which we'll talk about later. And then for the K3, you can't really see the word sanitize everywhere because both the ciphertext and the plain text have the keyword in them. so it's going to be even more confusing. Now I know not all of this makes sense and it might be a little confusing right now, but that's with a lot of things of Codebusters. We can explain all we want the scientific or the logical procedures of it, but a lot of Codebusters it's better to just practice and do it rather than necessarily understand it. But I would understand, if you do want to understand this, I will provide a video online. And the reason I'm making this video is because there's not a lot of resources for actually decoding them, but there's actually resources that you can read online or watch videos of that teaches you what these ciphers are more in depth. But for the purposes of this video, I'm only going to try to mainly help you decode them. So now let's look at some real examples on tests. So we have this one right here. This will be the most classic ones that you can see. Basically, you have an aristocrat here, and you have a key phrase here with these columns, boxes. The reason, basically, the first word will have this many letters in them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the second will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now you can probably tell this is a phrase, or let's say two words, because it's separated by the thing in between. Sometimes you don't have to provide one word, or sometimes you have 3 words, but for this one you can tell they have 2 words here. So for these ones, where they require you to just report a keyword with these boxes here, you don't actually have to find the entire cipher. You basically can just find the keyword and you don't even have to fill in the rest, and they'll give you credit for it. Which can become useful once you get better at finding keywords, because you don't always have to solve the full text in order to get the keyword. And secondly, you have these type of problems where it doesn't need you to report the keyword, but it still tells you that a keyword is used, rather than just having it being randomly encoded. So you could say a code by whoever has been encoded using a K1, K2, or K3 cipher, and if it says it uses a K1 and K2, then it could be abusable in the sense that there's a lot of different ways that you can use the keyword to your advantage. Because having a keyword, you can have a lot of different clues. I'll probably make a video about that later, tips and tricks to basically use the keyword to your advantage, because it can really help, especially for harder ones such as the misspelled aristocrats, patristocrats, or even xenocrypts. It can become really useful. So yeah, I'll definitely make a video about that later. So yeah, you can also get these. For these ones, you don't report the keyword, but it'll tell you that it uses a keyword, but you still have to find the full text. But the keyword can help you with that, as I said previously. So yeah, now there's no point in Codebusters if we don't do some practice, so I'm going to do some, practice with you guys. Alright, so basically how we're going to do this is we're going to start off with problems that I made myself. After answer keys to these, I'm just going to fill everything in and teach you guys how to find the keyword using the columns. Alright, because it's going to be a lot more tedious and a lot more time consuming to solve this whole thing from start to finish. So I'm just going to tell you guys what everything is and how to find the keyword that way. And after that, we're actually going to look into some practice problems that I found myself on on invitational tests online. These ones I haven't done before, so it can be a more holistic approach in how I can solve these from start to finish. Now here's a disclaimer, this is after states, a couple weeks in. I've gone a little teeny bit rusty, so pardon me for any type of mistakes or things like that, but I think it would be fine. So let's start off here with a basic one. I'll just fill in everything because I already have the answer to this. Okay, if you really think about it, nothing makes any sense. Okay, the magic of having the answer key. Okay, so yeah, let's just fill stuff in. I'll fill in uppercase to make things conventional. Alright, so if you solve this quote normally, you should get something like this. And and by the way, this software that I'm using, it's called Krita. It's a drawing software. Well, you can pretty much use any type of drawing software and a drawing tablet to just do this on a computer or an iPad or whatever. But personally, I don't really use this that much other than teaching or like doing this online for people to see what I'm doing, Codebusters. because it's quite different from doing it with actually a pencil and an eraser. So I don't recommend this because it definitely feels different from doing an actual test. But if you want to save some paper and money or whatever, no, go for it. It's still a good resource. So yeah, you should get this once you fill everything out if you solve this normally. And yeah, so if you can see, we have if you read this out, we have Y here and S, M, A, R, T, B, E, F, G, H. Okay, so as I talked about previously in the slideshow, the keyword starts at the end of the last alphabet, and then it begins, and then ends at the refresh of the alphabet. So basically, you can see that pretty closely here. Our keyword only has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words, and if you look at the interruption and the flow, I mean, you can kind of just see this. There's no way this would appear randomly, and just the replacement table. So this is like the easiest K1 that they can offer, where there's no repeating letters. It's just one word, and it's a pretty simple one, like smart. Okay, and if that still somehow doesn't make sense, or if we want to get more nuanced, then how we basically can confirm this is a keyword is because since we can assume A is already used up here, if we were to fill in the rest of the alphabet and B is the end, because well, we can see a refreshing pattern here. A lot of it is also just intuition. So we could try to fill it in. A isn't here because A is using a keyword, and then we fill in C and then D. And that's the only thing that will work here, because we have E and B, and the only two things between them are C and D. And then we have F, G, H, and then I, and then we could assume just put here J, because that's the only thing between I and K is J. And then K, and then L, and we don't have M here because M would be here. And then so we have N, O, and then guess, if you can take a guess what's here, that'd be great. What do you think is the only thing missing between O and U? Yeah, if you guess P and Q, you are right. Alright, so that's O, P, Q, U, and then V, W, X, Y, and then Z. If you fill in everything, you can pretty much just see that Z is here, and this is the refreshing start. So we can pretty much confirm that this is smart. Now you really don't have to do this to find the keyword, but it makes understanding it a lot easier, and also more, let's say, utilizable in different scenarios. So yeah, this is like the most simple example. Basically, you just fill things in. It's a K1, and then this shows up, right? Now K2 is going to be a little different. We'll get into that later, but I'm going to do another K1 practice. So with this one, I'm going to fill it in as well. Hold on 1 second. Alright. Okay, so we have everything filled in here with the with the quote being, "States was certainly a roller coaster of emotions. Like during the state Codebusters test, I quite literally pissed myself." Well, don't ask me about that, but funny, cool, right? Haha. Okay, so we can see here, if you look at it, we try to find the interruption. Okay, G, I, K, M, N, O, Q, R. Since, okay, you can also do something like this, where you know that, oh, this is OQ, but it's supposed to be OPQ. So since you know O and Q, there's no P in between, you can automatically just infer that it's in the keyword unless you screwed something up. So what I like to do is I like to do this, where I basically just write K and the equals, and then I put a comma here for any letters that I know are in the keyword. This is especially useful for the K3, which I'm not going to talk about in this video. So if you can notice here, before I even start with the keyword again, you can tell that this is quite a long quote, right? And solving all of this will be quite tedious just to find the keyword. And I'm trying to keep things as bearable as possible, because there's definitely a lot faster ways to find the keyword without solving this whole thing. Even though it's a magnificent quote by itself, right? Sometimes you just have to be more competitive and faster. And as you do more of these practice, you automatically figure out ways to do them faster and better. But as I said previously in the slideshow, I'll make a video about that as well. So yeah, you can see here I'm trying to keep things simple and explain to W, X, Y, and Z. So yeah, you can just automatically assume this is Z. You don't even have to fill it in. But I'll fill it in anyways. Alright, so you can just say like, oh yeah, this is the end of the key, the start with the keyword, and then you see SPLAHB. B wouldn't really make sense. You can tell that this is a repeating here. B, C, D, E, F. So I would just put it like this. So yeah, we have SPLAH, which is actually a problem because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and spla isn't really like a common word. So what's up here? So here's something that you should know about the keyword as well. Even if there's repeating letters, only the first from the left will actually be put in the keyword. So if you have something like, let's say, little as your keyword, you're not actually gonna have two. Sorry, I gotta pick up a phone call. 1 sec. Okay, sorry about that. I'm back. So as I was saying, if you have the keyword of little, you're not gonna have the whole thing in the keyword like LITTLE, right? But rather you're gonna have LITLE, because you can't have two of the same letters, because that's gonna mess up the whole alphabet, because you can't just automatically add one. Something has to cancel out. And so yeah, if we take that logically with this one, then we can infer that one of these letters repeats itself. And what word do you think can make with this? Well, sometimes it's just intuition and basically kind of wordle it, but the only thing that would make sense here is splash. So this example is a little harder than the previous one, but still not considered a hard one, because it's just one more a guessing, I guess. And you can't always be accurate with these, but you can get as accurate as possible by doing more and more practice. But yeah, the keyword of this embarrassing statement is actually splash. So yeah, okay. And now for the next one, we have decrypt the keyword of this K1 was cut by JC Poo. Oh, and by the way, not for this one, but for a lot of other ones, there will be a lot of useful hints. Actually, even for this one, because it tells you that's a K1. But you always, for any test, but more importantly for just Codebusters, it's always best to read the actual sentence, because a lot of times it can provide a lot of clues and different hints for you to try to get the actual solution faster and more efficiently. There's a lot of times where I'm stuck on a problem, I get it afterwards, I spend like over 10 minutes on it, but after looking back at after I read it, just a lot of hints in there that I could have used very wisely, but I didn't. So always read these before going into the actual problem. I know you want to be fast enough, it's our natural instinct, but sometimes we just have to look at this first. So yeah, I just fill this in as the other ones. Alright, so now we have the table filled in, and as you would if you solved this normally. So it says the Angry Bird was a popular franchise where you use slingshots to launch birds of different colors. Alright, cool. Okay, so we have this right here. If you notice the interruption, you can probably infer that it's the thing that comes after the Y, and Z would be here. I'm not going to fill in this whole table because you got the gist of it in the last two examples. But yeah, you see this here, BIGEST, RD, and then you got ACFH. So you can probably infer the alphabet refreshes itself over here, because D would never come before A, and AC, and with B being used up, you can see B is used up here, so it's not going to be used. So yeah, here you go, put a column divider there, and you put divider here, just for the visuals. And okay, so we can tell that the first thing has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 words. 1, 2, 3, 4 words. Okay, so let's try to find out what this is. So we can automatically just put B as the first thing here, because, well, this is never going to repeat itself. And the second thing is probably just going to be IG as well, because it's very weird. Like, it wouldn't make sense for it to be like BIIG or BIBG or something like that. So basically, as the word gets longer, there's a higher chance of something repeating. But if it's just shorter, if you just start on the front, there's not really a big chance of something repeating. Except If you put this as EST, you can notice something is off. You just write it out, and that it says biggest, I guess, but it doesn't have something here. And the reason for that is biggest has two G's. So you kind of just guess that this would be biggest, right? Yeah. Let's suppose this is biggest, and then we see these two things here, RD. However, if we're confident that this is biggest, and because it's not always going to be right? But for this one, I'm pretty confident that it's biggest. Well, because I made it, but for this one right here with 4 letters, RD, I guess it can be here, or it could be here, or it could be here, or it could be here. It's just that the R has to come before the D, pretty much. But none of those really make sense. I guess we can have something like biggest reds, right? Because we can have the R come first, and then D come, and then E and S is already used. So if it repeats, we can have like biggest reds. But that wouldn't make sense here. Like reading it out wouldn't really make sense. Sure, the Angry Bird, one of them is red, but like what you can actually, sometimes it's pretty tricky for these ones. So you have to play around with it sometimes, but sometimes they just come naturally to you. You might be like, hey, it might be the biggest bird, you know, because B and I are also used, and RD is here. So and the text is about Angry Birds. Sometimes the test writer likes to give different hints in the actual quote. For example, this one's about Angry Birds, and the key phrase is the biggest bird. So yeah, as you can see, biggest reds would technically also work if the test writer wanted it to be biggest reds, but that's the problem with some of these K1s or K2s or K3s even, is that you can, it's hard to always guarantee it being right. So this is kind of like a guessing factor, but you just have to take your best guess sometimes. But at the same time, if you do more practice, your intuition will just come naturally. And this is pretty much as hard as a K1 would get. This is, yeah, just having to guess would be the hardest part. So that's pretty much it for K1s, and now let's get into K2s. Now let's do some actual K2s. So, like the other ones, I'm just gonna fill it in and tell you the process. Okay, so now let's say, now that we're done filling in the table and the overall text, the quote, you might notice that we can't really make any tangible words out of this mess, because that's how a K2 is supposed to be. Because this will be the plain text, so, and the keyword is not in the plain text, but it's rather in the ciphertext. So if you were to solve this using your normal Aristocrat filling in, like the most generic type of filling in way, then you would probably get something like this, where like you see here A will map to M, A is M, and then B is V, and E is T, and so on, right? That's how you would fill in like any other Aristocrat if you want to use the table. But instead, for a K2, there's 2 ways to do this, and one of them is definitely better than the other way. So you could do it like this, but you would have to erase absolutely everything and then refill everything basically upside down. Or you can start from the very beginning and fill things in like a K2. So I'll explain the more basic one, but the less efficient way. So instead of having all of these filled in like this, you basically, okay, this won't redo, but so you basically fill in the other way. So how the best way to explain this, I guess, is basically instead of having A map to something, you have something that maps to A for the first one. And instead of something that maps to B, you have B mapped to something. So it's basically reversed. It's from top to bottom this time instead of bottom to top, I guess. So for example, rather than finding out that A maps to M, you'll find out what maps to A again. So if we can look here, what maps to A is L maps to A, right? So we put an L, and we look at what maps to B, and according to this, M maps to B, right? and then instead of what maps to, okay, and the O maps to C, and then Q maps to D, and the 1 maps to E, let's see, S maps to E, and you get the gist of it, right? Instead of having it the other way, you basically map it from top to bottom. And that's how you do it for a K2 pretty much, and let me just fill it in now. Okay, so if you do it that way, once you fill it in, everything in from top to bottom, then hey, it looks a lot more like the previous ones, right? Where it's also, you find your keyword is here, and then there's basically a whole chain of cycle repeating itself. And you can see that here. LMOQ, and Z, and then yeah, once you do this, you basically just have the keyword here, right? And then this refreshes itself. So yeah, that's basically how you do a K2. So some people in the past, when I first started doing Codebusters, this is also how you did it, right? I basically just filled in everything I could and used it as the frequency table to basically match things that I would miss, right? But that's not really the most efficient way. It actually takes a lot more time and could cost you a few problem or two at the end of the test because you did it this way. But rather, what I started doing afterwards is I just basically scrapped this idea of filling everything in as a K1 and then filling in as a K2 afterwards. I was just filling from the K2 from the start. So yeah, and you might be wondering, hey, that doesn't really make that much sense because the frequencies don't match up, and that's bad, right? Well, actually, you can actually have a trick to find the frequency as well. So let's say you want to find out how many times E repeats, right? But E doesn't repeat 11 times if you so E doesn't repeat 11 times here, and D doesn't repeat 7, C doesn't repeat 1, B doesn't repeat 1, A doesn't repeat 8 times, because in a K2 it's reversed. So how it actually works is, rather than E repeating 11 times, you have to look at the replacement text up here, the S. You go to S right here, and since S repeats 17 times, that means E repeats 17 times rather than 11 times. And I guess the reverse for that would be here, right? T doesn't repeat, wait, okay, this is a coincidence, but you'll basically be like, T doesn't repeat 11 times, but E repeats 11 times, so T, okay, this is a bad example because they're not supposed to match up and all, but alright, so let's look at L, right? L is relatively common, but it's not 15 words common, 15 letters common. So 1 second, sorry. Alright, so basically, yeah, L wouldn't repeat 15 times. So okay, so what you would do here is basically you want to find out how many times L repeats. So you look at P, and since P repeats 4 times, that means L repeats 4 times. Now this will take some getting used to, but it's actually a lot better way of finding the of basically just being more efficient with your time. It will take some practice, but that's Codebusters, practice, right? And once you get better at doing that, and once you get used to it, okay, it'll become a lot better. So here we can pretty much just see our keyword here as is Pathfinder. Nothing repeats here, good for us, right? But like a K1, a K2 can also have repeating letters. So let's just fill this in. And yeah, you'll get your money for it, 232 points. And just like a K1, you don't have to fill in absolutely everything here. But yeah, as I said, once you get better, it'll make more sense. And yeah, now let's do another one. Okay. So I'll fill it in as the other ones. Alright, so for this one, I'm just gonna fill it in from the previous way that I would recommend as a K2 rather than as a K1. So yeah, 1 maps to A, V maps to A, and then B maps to N, and then wait, does it? No, it doesn't. Okay, but okay, W maps to B, 1 maps to C. Oh, and also notice here, because it's a K2, you can also fill stuff in that doesn't technically repeat. Like here, it doesn't technically repeat, right? If you fill it as a plain text. But for this, we actually know that D repeats. Since Y repeats 2 times, we know that D also repeats 2 times. So it's technically repeating 2 times, but Yeah, yeah. Oh, and then because of that, some won't actually repeat, like F. Nothing repeats. Nothing maps to F. So yeah. Okay, so now that we're done putting the stuff in, filling in the table, everything that we have, this one is rather weird looking, right? You can't really make any, just by looking at it, you can't really make any tangible guesses to what the keyword is. And it doesn't help, certainly doesn't help that it repeats 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Certainly doesn't help that it has 11 words in it, I mean letters in it. So basically, we can kind of assume that since Z is here, it's in an awkward position. So we can assume that Z is in a keyword. And so it goes W, X, and Y in the pattern of the last letters of the alphabet. And then it goes to F. We can assume that this is the start of the keyword. And since it goes O and the A, B, C, which this would signify that it repeats itself, unless something comes after A, like maybe AN, but you can never be really certain. But for this purpose, for the purpose of this video, I just say that it divides here, ends here, and that it goes back to A, B, C, and then whatever, right? But we're missing a few words here. So what can we do, right? Nothing maps to G here in the plain text, and nothing maps to F here that's in the plain text. So so what we have to do here is basically to use our previous method. This is the part where I said it will be better because it will help with specific situations like this. So you put your K here, right? Just make a note, and then we read it out. A, B, C, and then, D and E are both missing. We know from this that E is in the keyword. So, well, E is here, but D isn't here, so we have to assume that D is also in the keyword. And then it goes, and then E, F, and then F is also in the keyword, so it's not here, which makes sense. F, G, and then H and I are both missing. H, I. Okay, so we have to assume, sometimes we have to guess which one it is. Well, I just leave it here for now, because we can't really be sure, but I'll talk about it later. Just make a note. And then K, L, M, and both N and O are missing, and we can tell that N and O are here. So it would originally be N-O-P, but since we know that N and O are in our keyword, we just cross these out, we put P here. And then Q, and then R, and then S, T, R, and S. Let's see which one we can eliminate here. I guess we can't really eliminate any of right off the bat because they're missing here. So we'll keep a note just like the previous one here. Sorry. Okay. Go away. Okay. And then R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. That makes sense. We'll go U, V, W, X, Y, Z. All right. So now let's try to solve this. So we begin with the letter F because it's pretty much guaranteed. Actually, this is, now that I think about it, this is one of the harder K2s. I don't know why I made it this hard, but it is what it is. Okay, so alright. So based on what we have, let's just do this. We have our basically possibilities of everything that we could put. Alright, so these letters can fill in 1, 2, 3 of these spaces. Okay, and actually this one is like this K2 is hard to the point where we can't really explain it that well. It's mostly intuition. But alright, so let's just want to plug stuff in, right? F, D wouldn't make sense because nothing in the English alphabet goes F. Well, nothing, no word in the English alphabet goes F and then D. So we can basically say that D may still be in one of those two columns here, but it won't be in this one. So D won't be here. So now let's try H. F, H. There's also nothing in the English word that goes F, H. At least nothing that's common. So we'll rule that one out. F, I. That's possible. Yeah, I can potentially go here. And R, I can potentially, just give some example, right? Like fire, first, things like that. And R can also go here, perhaps. So we'll put that here because things like frame, frog, friend, those things also goes like FR, right? So alright, so we'll put those here for now. And then let's just try putting this in. So we put this in as FI. I don't really see anything off the bat. If I put D here, Firen, sure, but like, how good does that really sound? Fizen. Unless something repeats here, these don't really make tangible words, right? So let's try R instead. Okay, FRD, Freden. That would make sense. Friend. Okay, and we know a very common word in the English alphabet that I hope all of us have, of course, is, if you can guess, this would be D, friend. Because, yeah, that's just the thing that makes most sense if we try to plug it in the way that I did. This is also like a good strategy for cryptorhythms, I guess, where you just plug stuff in and see what works and what doesn't. But yeah, so okay, so we guess it to be friend. Then, okay, let's just plug this in and see what happened. Friend, and then goes Z, and then O. So either be something Z anywhere here, and then it'll be like something O, right? That could be any of these placements, you know. But yeah, let's just play around and see what we get. I mean, I already know the answer to this, but I'll try to guess throughout this video, right? I hope you've been just guessing, like, not just been listening to me talking, but actually thinking with critical skills of, this might be potentially this. I hope you've been doing that all along. But okay, so friend, and then let's just pretend this would be Z. Or okay, this is funny, but like, if you really want, I guess you could put friend Riz. That's not the key word because it doesn't repeat like this. There's one left here. I mean, if this wasn't here, maybe perhaps, but that would be a really dapper test writer to put something like that. But that unfortunately is not the key word. So again, with the other ones, you need to do some guessing, right? But if we just put Z here and we try to make something, friend, Z-I-N, Z-I-D, none of these really make sense, but if we put O here and then we see that there's 3 things left over, I guess Z, I just realized this, but O is really common after Z, even though Z isn't that, like, a word that has Z with the start usually follows an O, like zone, zoo, I don't know that many words with Z, but yeah, basically once you guess a couple times what this is, you can probably just like tell this would be friend zone, right? And since we have something that's left over here, it would be, well, since S isn't used, so it wouldn't be S friend zones, or so it would be friend zoned because D is already used, and N and E is already used, so you just have to extract those from here and use it here. Now again, there's not really a mathematical way or really scientific way of getting this. It's again intuition, but it's possible to definitely get this. And friend zoned, sucks for you, right? Okay, so now that we're done with the practice that I made myself, now let's actually look at a few real practice that I found online.